We are going to talk about Chapter 6 this morning, and so I'll want to share my screen. As you can see, Chapter 6 is on sediments and sedimentary rocks. It's sort of a companion chapter to tag along with Chapter 5. And we'll talk about it before we do our lab on sedimentary rocks. So, sedimentary rocks are formed in a variety of different ways. One way is by the compaction or lithification of sediments to form these rocks. The kinds of rocks you find due to compaction or lithification would be sandstone, breccia, conglomerate. Some of the limestones form this way. These rocks have a tendency to have what we call a clastic texture. And what that means is that it's comprised of little tiny bits of material. When I was taking geology, they wanted us to lick the rocks if we were in doubt because your tongue's very sensitive and we'd be able to feel the little particles that the rock was made out of. I do not suggest you go around licking our samples. So as an example of a rock that's formed this way, these are two photographs of the rock conglomerate. It is a sedimentary rock and it's made out of lots of little pebbles of different sizes that have been naturally glued together. So typically you'll have a lot of these little round rocks. The area will get flooded by water that has a high calcite concentration. When the water evaporates, the calcite acts as a natural glue to hold it together, but other minerals can also act to glue it together. It does not have to be calcite, but typically these will have a rounded, they'll be made out of rounded pebbles if they're to be a conglomerate. If the pebbles were sharp and angular, it would be breccia. Okay, moving along. So you can compact your sediment and turn it into a rock. You can also let precipitation occur. So the water can contain dissolved minerals, and when the water evaporates, the minerals settle down and form a solid rock. This type of sedimentary rock usually is referred to as having a crystalline texture. You don't normally see little individual grains in it. If you rubbed your hand over it, it would feel smooth. It has a tendency to feel very smooth. As an example, chert is a sedimentary rock formed in this way. And these are 4 examples. All of them count as chert. Chert is really microcrystalline quartz. So the crystals that form during the precipitation process are so small you can't see them as individual crystals. If it is black and used for making tools, we would call it flint. If it's red, they oftentimes call it jasper. If it's a lighter beige color, either a more white or a, sometimes it can be a peachy color, it would be just called chert, or there's a particular type of it called novaculite. But all 4 of these are really types of chert. In lab, we will have a piece of flint for you to differentiate, but I don't have any jasper. At least I don't think I do. I haven't run across it yet. So examples of rocks that are formed by precipitation. We will have some rock salt that I'll put out. We'll have samples of gypsum and dolomite as well. So hopefully when you come to lab, you'll be able to observe the rocks a little more closely and tell them apart. We also can form sedimentary rocks by the consolidation of plants and animals to form organic sedimentary rocks. We describe them as having an organic texture associated with them. Chalk is an example. A little sea creature dies and his little remains fall to the bottom of the ocean, and over a really long period of time it actually turns into a rock, and the rock can be chalk. The White Cliffs of Dover are chalk cliffs, and it's evidence of that part of England was very much underwater at one time. Coquina is another example. We'll see a slide of what that looks like in a minute. Coal is an example. Oolitic limestone is sort of a special example. This is a photograph, well, two photographs of it. Oolitic limestone is made of little teeny tiny round things, oolites. They're about the size of a pinhead, but can be larger. And they're actually, the oolites are sort of naturally occurring rock pearls, if you will. A little bit of material will be in the ocean, and ocean water, swift currents will bathe it. And the little bit of material acts as a condensation nuclei, if you will. It acts as a center. And over time, the ocean deposits material that coats it. You can see in this enlargement, this is a piece of oolitic limestone that's been sliced really thin and then put under a microscope. So you can see the center looks very different from the layers that surround it. So the center is the nucleus, and then these layers round it out. They can come in different colors and different sizes. It really is kind of nifty. So some rock textures are not just organic or inorganic or crystalline, but they have combination textures. Coquina is an example. It is clastic, it's made out of chunks, but it's organic material. If we look at a photograph, coquina is a name for a rock that's made out of the consolidation of seashells. You can see, this is a really nice one because you can see the individual shells in it, and you can recognize them as seashells. So the seashells pile up, and the calcite in the water gets between it, and when the water evaporates, the calcite again acts as a natural glue to hold it together. The fort at St. Augustine in Florida is made out of coquina. We will have some coquina in our lab on sedimentary rocks, and it won't look like the one with the pretty shells in it. It will look more like this one. I always describe this as looking like uncooked oatmeal that's been glued together. Coquina is actually a little bivalve. It's a little animal that lives in the ocean. Where I grew up in Pensacola, Florida, when the waves come in, the little coquina, they're about the size maybe of one of my fingernails. The water would wash it in, and then it would dig quick, quick, quick down into the sand to make these little round holes. When they die, the shells, again, I said it was a bivalve, so the shells will pop open and they make the shells are still attached at the little hinge, and it looks almost like a little butterfly. So if you're collecting shells and it looks like half a butterfly wing, it's probably a coquina. They come in pinks and lavenders and purples and pale yellows. They're really very pretty. But the bottom photograph is shells that have gotten beaten up quite a bit. The top one, the shells were not beaten up so much. So coal has what we refer to as a clastic or organic texture. Sometimes we talk about it as being crystalline organic. You'll see coal in lab. We've got several different pieces of it. Fossiliferous limestone has fossils in it. You'll be able to see seashell imprints in it, hopefully. And again, the oolitic limestone, the little oolites, the circles are inorganic material, but what's coating it is organic. So it's kind of a combination of things. So one of the tools we'll use in lab will be acid. You'll have a bottle of probably hydrochloric acid on the table. You want to be careful with it. We'll talk about it more at lab time. You can take a drop of that acid and place it on the rock. If it bubbles, that means your rock has calcite in it. Limestone has calcite in it. Chalk has calcite in it. Coquina would have calcite in it. Now, of these three, the only one you're going to test for the acid is the limestone. You will not be putting acid on my chalk or my coquina. All right, you will not do that, only on things you suspect of being limestone. We have better ways to tell chalk and coquina from other materials. Here's a really nice photograph showing you a little pipette where a drop of acid has been placed on this sample, and we see all the little bubbles. Our samples don't usually bubble quite this much, but they do bubble. So suppose you have a sample that does not bubble. That means it does not contain calcite. Lots of things don't contain calcite. Primary among them for us will be sandstone. So normally in lab, we will use acid to tell limestone from sandstone. Limestone will bubble, sandstone will not. You have other things you can read about, how to tell chalk from chert. I've already talked about sandstone and limestone. Shale has layers. Coal, if you handle it enough, is going to make your hands a little dirty. So let's talk about some of the sedimentary rocks and the source area and the environment of deposition. A sedimentary rock is interesting because it can usually tell you two things. Where did the material that it's made out of come from, and where did the rock actually solidify? So the source area is where did it come from? The source area is where did it come from? And it is all about the kinds of minerals that are in that sample. So if you have a sedimentary rock and it's made out of things that don't seem to be native to the area, then you're not in the source area for it. The area of deposition is also very telling. There are lots of depositional environments, and the kinds of rocks you create vary with the environment. If you're in a continental environment, so a sort of landlocked one, the sorts of influences you'll see will be glaciers. Alluvial fans are fan-shaped deposits that a river will dump when it comes down from the mountains and hits a flat area. River channels will also count as these environments. So will the floodplains on either side of the river, lakes, and dunes, like in the desert, can also count as these depositional environments. And they each produce unique types of rocks. So for a glacier, for example, the rocks are going to be unsorted. So you have big ones and little ones and medium-sized ones all in the same place. They're going to look unweathered, and what that usually means is they'll be sharp and angular, not rounded. And they'll also have sand and silt and clay mixed in. So it's just, it looks like kind of the casserole of rocks, everything piled in together. Dunes, on the other hand, you have usually well-sorted rocks. So big ones on the bottom, small ones on the top. They're usually well-rounded. They almost always make rocks with a lot of quartz in them. And they show what we refer to as cross-bedding or festooning. Festooning is if you took some sort of garland and tried to decorate with it. So you come down and up and down and up and down and up. That's festooning. You can see in our little photograph, here we have these little layers, but it looks like they come and they gather up here and then they begin again over there. And we have some layers very distinctive right in this region. So this is cross bedding and indicates that it might very well have formed in a dune environment. So you can have marine environments associated with the ocean. You can also have deltas, beaches, lagoons, marine shelves, and reefs. All of these produce different kinds of sedimentary rock. One thing that's really interesting in these sorts of rocks are ripple marks, or fossils if it forms in the ocean. So a ripple mark forms when you have a sediment and the waves come in and it sort of alters the shape of it. You may have seen these if you've ever been to a lake and you've looked at the real fine silt right there near the shoreline. So currents that move in one direction will have ripple marks that look steeper on one side than the other. Currents that go back and forth, the ripple marks tend to be uniform on one side when compared to the other. And here's a little graphic to show you. Here are some car keys, and these are the ripple marks. And that looks like that's it. So we will stop, and you should be ready for the